Hello and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 83, our Summer Jams 2023. It's going to be a very hot and smoky summer, apparently. So we're going to have some hot summer jams for you to enjoy this year. And yeah, it's vaporwave is a lot of things. It is dystopian, hypnagogic, but it's also just, fun tunes for fun times. It can be all these things. Mm-hmm. So we've done it before, and Burke said, why do we do it again? It's like, yeah, no, that's a good idea. We should find some good new vaporwave to celebrate. Summer is finally here. Yay.
Yeah. And also, I think our previous Summer Jam episodes, I sort of commented on last week, or not last week, but last episode, that was like trying to be a little clever. Like, these are sleepy summer jams, or like, these are actually Dungeon Synth summer jams would actually be fun. I was going to make fun of myself. But anyway, the point being is that these are just albums that capture some aspect of summer to me, not in a clever way. They're just jams. They're just great to listen to and are season appropriate. Two very different albums.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I really liked is that we each picked something that was very different, not so much on the theme, but just like representing different aspects of summer. Summer is a multifaceted season. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we don't really have a clever intro. There's no big preamble discussion about these. It's just a very episode, music focused episode.
Yeah. Sometimes summer jams can just be summer jams. That sample is from track 2 of Dusty Roads by Limousine. The track is called Lonesome Roads, although it's spelled differently on the track name. But Dusty Roads is a album themed on the summer road trip, a time-honored tradition ever since we had automobiles and roads to drive them on. The road trip has been it's a very American form of vacation. I know, obviously, people take road trips all over the world, but it is part of American pop culture now. Particularly, Dusty Roads is very desert themed. And we've talked about Limousine before with Omega Mall X on our 2020 Best of Vaporwave episode. But this is a brand new album from Limousine. It is from this year. I believe it came out in April. April 21st. And yeah, it is, it's a short, sweet album. A very interesting take for a vaporwave album it's a very Plunderphonics based album, but like the source of the sample is very unusual for vaporwave. I had a lot of fun listening to this album. It's more of a sleepy, chill summer jam, but it's driving through the desert, nothing but road in front of you, and just relaxing as you hit the blacktop.
Yeah. You mentioned that Rhodes is spelled different in your sample track title. Rhodes is in the keyboard. It's a musical instrument, the electric piano. Rhodes keyboard. Oh,
okay.
Well, I'm assuming there's also Rhodes, an island in Greece. But given the sound of the track and the theme of the album, I'm going to say they're probably doing Rhodes keyboards, which are like an intrinsically very vintage sound. They really blew up in the 70s, both in like jazz and prog and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I know I've talked about them before, but the Rhodes keyboard is really interesting. It's like a true electric piano. So the striking the keys causes a little hammer to hit like a wire, much like an electric guitar is like an amplified electric current versus like a synth keyboard where it like triggers some synth patch to play. It's actually like more, I don't know. It's more like an electric guitar than like a like a Casio keyboard or something.
Nice. Yeah, I imagine it is referencing the piano then, because this is a very 70s prog and jazz kind of sourced album.
Yeah.
It is very reminiscent. Like, when I was listening to this album, I was just thinking of like 70s road trip movies and, you know, and 70s like desert sleaze kind of movies, like the whole like bikers and hippies out in the desert, you know, taking drugs and going to late night bars and lounges and getting into misadventures. Probably someone gets murdered or wanders out in the desert to die. But, you know, it's a good time for most people. And yeah,
as long as you're not on the set of Easy Rider, you're doing
yeah,
right.
Exactly. Right. It's like Easy Rider, but in the desert. Yeah.
And happier.
A little happier. Yeah, it is. Limousine calls this a nature wave album, which I can see because aside from the plunderphonics, there's a lot of field recordings in this of the road in the desert at night. You know, you can hear the sound of the highway nearby. You can hear the wind. It's really fun and just something to this is great driving music, I would think.
Yeah. And I think the road trip as your reference point for the summer in the summer jam is pretty apt. I mean, I definitely did a lot of road trips as a kid. And then, I don't know, at some point, did these go out of style? Like, I feel like we just stopped. It probably coincides with like being in high school or something. But yeah, like on the East Coast, I'm sure you have places you got, you know, in the Ozarks and stuff. On the East Coast, there's a lot of like driving down to the Outer Banks or like driving over. I'm in Maryland. So like going over to Rehoboth or going over to Ocean City or going over to the Chesapeake and stuff. So it's a very summer activity.
No, as a kid, like my parents, we drove all over the country. Like we drove from Pennsylvania to California and, you know, moving to California for a bit. And we went through all the desert, you know. And yeah, I mean, in the Midwest, there's similar things. You know, you go to the lake for the weekend or go up to the big city, you know, Kansas City or St. Louis or whatever. I'd imagine everybody in America or most people in America would have these kind of memories. And certainly as life has gotten busier and busier as adults, there's fewer and fewer opportunities for road trips, but it has not disappeared. Yeah. And Limousine did something really interesting with this album because with its release, he put up forth his own little treasure hunting contest or competition where the cassette release of this album had hidden notes. This is paired with a box of buried treasure I buried out in the California desert this spring. So there are clues in the little J card on the cassette, and the box contains rare Limousine merch, including all my vinyl test presses, all vinyl LPs, all tapes, tour merchandise, rare never sold items, set list, merch set sheets, personal notes, gold, cash, PSA trading cards, and much more. And so he posted about this in April with the release of the album. And then someone found it May 13th. And, you know, they have photos. We have a link in the little community notes of, you know, the actual site where it was hidden. He's going to leave a little geocache there so people will find something. I forgot about geocaching. But that's a whole thing. Yeah, he says, growing up, I was very much inspired by pirate lore and The Goonies being one of my favorite films of all time. I knew I just had to do something similar for y'all, and it worked. So, I think it's rather charming.
Yeah, it's a fun little activity, and it's funny. You know, you got a fan base. It took less than a month for them to find it.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, though, right? Like either it's impossible to find. That seems to be the way with these kind of like treasure hunt or things. Either it's found very quickly or it's never found. Like there's no middle ground. There's no like, oh yeah, in 6 months they found it. It's either like, oh yeah, we got it that week, or it's been 10 years and no one knows where it is. And maybe someone found it and just didn't report it. Maybe it was found by someone who had no idea what was going on, just found it by chance. Maybe, you know, animals destroyed it, or maybe, yeah, it's just gone. So
we haven't actually talked much about the music. Yeah. So that's really interesting. But the music itself, what do I want to say about it? Because I just really, really think it like the choice of going more like Southwest style. And like the overall construction of the album, not just like the plunderphonics and the field recording aspect, but it's so interesting because it is like it's a road trip, but it's a very like sleepy road trip in a good way. So, you know, it opens up with this opening track, Joshua Tree, which makes sense because the geocache was found in Joshua Tree National Park. So a little opening hint there is largely just like fading into nature sounds. And there's not really like anything until the last minute or so where like a little bit of really soft music comes in.
Yeah. And it's like the opening is so slow. Like it takes like like the first minute you're like, has it started? Like, unless you're listening with headphones and you have it cranked up, like you're not it's so subtle and gradual.
A long purposeful fade. It's like, really dragged out. But I don't know. I just love all these samples. I wish I knew where more of them were from.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, like I really like track 5, Los Angeles, which is like almost like big bandy, but like really distorted and crushed in there. But it's like loungy, I guess, but maybe more than big band, like loungy.
Yeah.
Like lounge lizard type music.
Yeah, why don't we listen to that track? Track 5, Los Angeles, California. Yeah, I quite liked track 5 as well. The big band jazz with like some kind of echoing layered soundscape on top of it. Something like there's something really interesting going on. I don't know. I don't know if I can like reverse engineer it, but like I like it. The sound is more 60s and 70s than 80s. Like I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if there's stuff from the early 80s in here, but like the vibe, if you will, is very 70s for me. It's gives it a more psychedelic or prog rock feeling than, you know, most of it, but it's still very vaporwave, right? There's a lot of pitch shift stuff. There's a lot of like echo and like reverb, kind of distant and like, and still mixing in with the field recordings. I really like on track 12, My Trains Are Coming. There's like the transition at the end of the track it sounds like a radio, just changing the radio station, just changing, you know, your car radio a little bit. Yeah. It is a more chill album, but it's still, it's so focused on the road trip experience and like the feeling of being on a road trip.
Yeah. And I don't quite know what that is, like why it produces that feeling in me, but it does very much feel like an album where you are going places, right? So I don't know if it's the fact that everything kind of has that like playing in another room vibe to it, or it's so, well, it'll just feel like 60s, 70s and 80s. It pulls from like a lot of different genres and different feels and different feelings, basically, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. So like each track, it does feel very road trippy to me. And also it could be that I'm over absorbing the theming and like projecting it back on the album. Yeah. But it does feel like an album where you like, you're constantly like pulling up to places where this music is playing, like diegetic in some sense of like, you know, we drove through Sedona, Arizona, which is track 4. You know, we stopped at a bar or whatever, and this is what was playing. Yeah. Or a cafe, I guess. Sedona, Arizona is more like cafe music. It sounds more like gift shop music in some sense. Not pejoratively. And then like, we get to LA and we go to the lounge, and then we're back on the road through the Valley of Death, which is track 6. And then the places kind of disappear, kind of becomes more like these relationship type conversations between people. Yeah. Just totally going by track names. Oh, yeah. So there's this interesting. It's kind of like this decay or like crumbling of the road trip as you go to, which is sort of interesting. And it's sort of also served by like the fact that the album is bookended by these field recordings, right? Like it opens up with a field recording, ends with the field recordings of the road. And so it's like you're getting in the car and you're getting out of the car, you know? So I think that contributes to the feeling as well. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a fun little album. I mean, the whole run is like 30 minutes, 31 minutes, something like that. So most of the tracks are very short, you know, just a couple minutes. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like you could have easily padded this out and had a lot of similar tracks, but like it's a more tightly curated experience, I think serves it well. So definitely put it on your playlists for your road trip summer jams. Yeah. These tracks also would go well and mix in with other vaporwave. I think like you could put this in a lot of mixes and these tracks would stand on their own. Oh yeah.
Because also they're so distinctive compared to a lot of vaporwave. Like it's going to like, this is interesting. I haven't heard this kind of sound in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Great album. Great album. Really fun to listen to. I'm glad you picked it. Because I probably wouldn't have checked it out on my own.
Yeah. And I picked it and I was like, oh, well, hey, Treasure Hunt. That sounds neat. And then it's like, oh, the album's great too. Awesome.
That was a bit from track 3, Smooth Character, off the latest album from Luxury Elite, Fashion Pop, which as of time of recording just came out a couple weeks ago. And yeah, so this is the latest from vaporwave, late night lo-fi, absolute classic generator veteran Luxury Elite, who we have also talked about previously, actually on the same episode as we previously talked about Limousine. We did High Society on our Best of 2020 episode. And I would be earnestly surprised if I hadn't mentioned other Lux albums like World Class or like New Classics or something, because I've just really enjoyed her music a lot for like the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, Luxury Elite is an artist who the longer I've listened to her work, the more I appreciate it. Like, when I first heard Luxury Elite, I was actually kind of like, like World Class did not really do much for me, but like I think my tastes my tastes have changed over the years, especially doing this podcast, and I really like this album. Like I think this is my favorite Luxury Elite album. So nice. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I'll have to revisit like her earlier work now, I think, and reevaluate it. And this is not a unique thing for me. There's a lot of vaporwave that I would listen to like when it came out 10 years ago or whatever. And I'm like, because it was really in a signal wave infinity frequencies kind of mood back then. And now I've expanded my horizons and I can appreciate a wider range of vaporwave.
That'd be interesting to do like a revisit of stuff you thought you were like mid on or whatever.
Yeah.
See what you think of it now. So I think what I really like about Luxury Elite's approach to this sort of vaporwave late night lo-fi work is, we've talked about this before, is a lot of it, sometimes in good ways, is very ironic. Like, weren't the 90s goofy, or like, wow, everything was neon. Wasn't that weird? And she does not do that. I think it's largely rooted in like an absolute unironic and sincere love of that aesthetic in that era. And I think as a result, I just think that that sincerity comes through and makes it stand above some of the fun, more kind of like ironic takes on sampling or emulating music of that era. That's the big thing about her music that stands out to me, because she's a super nice person. We've crossed paths a few times on like the Hot Takes Discord, and like, we'll talk about like 90s advertising campaigns, or like how crazy, like legitimately interesting, like fashion or design was, and shows I'd completely forgotten about. Like we were talking about silk stockings. The other week, because like one character in that show has an apartment that is just literally like a vaporwave album cover.
Oh,
like 15 years before anybody even thought of vaporwave.
Oh my God.
It is like, it just looks like parody. Like if you did not know it was from a 90s television show, you would think it was like really good vaporwave.
Oh, damn, I want to see this. Yeah, I don't think I watched that show.
I'll dig up the screenshot. Yeah, I remember it existing. I never really watched it. But yeah, the aesthetic of that show is wild. But anyway, yeah, the point being that I think just like an authentic love of all this era of media really comes through in the music.
Oh yeah, no, 100. I basically wrote the same thing, as like you could really feel as though you're the atrium of a mall in 1989, waiting for J.C. Penney's summer fashion line about to hit the stage. Like, this is not ironic condemnation of this type of music, but a really sincere appreciation of this this sort of like era synth and MIDI, like very clean, very precise, entirely synthesized sound. Like everything is made in a keyboard or a DAW or something like that. Like there is nothing analog. There is nothing from a real instrument. It is all synth and it's all good. So yeah, it's very chipper. It's very upbeat. It's very optimistic, and it's fun. Yeah. You just like, you know, this whole thing, oh, this is cringe, this is bad, this is awkward, this is embarrassing, but like just get by that and just like they really like enjoy this, just appreciate it, and you'll feel better. It's feel good music.
Yeah. I totally agree. Also, little bits of Twin Peaks references in some of the melodies. So
yeah.
Also a sucker there, which sort of segues into my second point when thinking about music or like talking about albums or what I like about, because this is again very different from the Limousine album, which was like the sleepy road trip. You know, this is like a pop, right?
Oh yeah.
But I really like music that makes, when you're listening to it, like that's all you want to think about, or like you only want to think about like what the music makes you feel. And that's true of, I think, all music I like, even like somber or like gloomy signal wave and stuff. And it tends to be that I like connections and I like when music makes me think of other media. I don't know. That's not meant to be like unfair to the music. Like, I don't want to think that I'm not talking about music on its own terms, but I sort of caught myself and I do this all the time, whenever I'm taking notes of like listening to an album and writing it down, not just this album. I almost always phrase my thoughts in terms of their relation to other media. Like, this makes me feel like this type of movie. This makes me feel like this type of scene. So I'm going to do that a lot, but I just want to specify that that's like just how I like thinking about stuff.
Sure.
I don't know. Like, I just always feel like sometimes I come across as not taking the music on its own, but I think that's because I like to talk about it in like frameworks I'm more comfortable in, which tends to be like movies.
Sure. Well, I mean, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? And like, especially when you talk about vaporwave, like that, the 80s are the era of synth music dominance, right? Like, this is like, it's the sound of the 80s. Like, and yeah, no, I totally get it. Like, I think the vaporwave artists themselves are like in that same mindset. Like, they're all referencing like existing media and drawing those connections and trying to say something new with it. And no, that's a good way. Like, I mean, for me, I was more focused on like the variety of like what can you do with this very clean MIDI sound, and there's a lot of cool things that are done here. I think, you know, yeah. So
like to give an example of connecting back to media, the sample I played, which was from track 3. I think that's one of my favorites because it sounds like a science montage from like an 80s movie, like Real Genius.
Yeah.
To me, like there's like investigative bass, you know, like just absolutely throughout this whole album, amazing bass work, amazing bass samples or synth patches or wherever they're pulled from. They're fantastic. There's like kind of this investigative bass, and there's like the slow part in the middle, which is like Val Kilmer, like looking at the laser, and then like maybe some stuff doesn't work out. And then like, oh, they figure it out. And then it's like triumphant again at the end.
Yeah.
Just the way it kind of just sits with me, just like that's kind of like that's the best music. Kind of puts those sort of images in my head. Yeah, kind of independent of genre.
You know, I mean, there were bits that like got me thinking of other '80s music or very iconic music. Like the biggest thing for me is like track 7, and it's got those '80s like tom drums, like gated reverb, like Phil Collins in the air tonight, like kind of like doom doom. And I was like, hell yeah. Fucking love those drums. Yeah,
that's a good one. That was I do love how all in a good way, like all over the place this can be. Like there's so much exploration of different sounds. Yeah. Which is kind of another way it stands out, I think, from the Limousine album, which is like hyper focused on one theme. Whereas so like Natural Wonders is like a just awesome pop music. Yeah. Like it sounds like a pop backing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Crowded Bar, the next one is like synth flute and vocals and like smooth Streets of Rage music. Just like that real real chill drum.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is quite a bit of variety. Like there are these like track 9 has like a kind of a weird digital virtual has this like vocal chorus coming up in the midsection, and like it's so maybe that was sampled or something like that. But yeah, I really like the vocals for it. Track 11, I love me a good sax, and there's some good there's some good sax in there. Track 12 reminded me of like a kind of a chill synthwave thing. Really like the guitar strumming in it. Like, no, I think this is like maybe Luxury Lee's like, what is everything I can do on this keyboard? I'm just going to use all of the little virtual instruments on my keyboard and just do a different track for each one. But yeah, but it's still like everything does sound like it could be for a fashion show, right? Like everything is like, oh, here's our fun active wear, here's our evening wear, and oh, look at what Tiffany's wearing tonight, you know. But yeah, no, it's yeah.
The fashion show is interesting, and it's clearly a pretty obvious reference. It's called Fashion Pop is the name of the album, right? And you know, the album cover is full of high fashion photography that you do see all the time. But I just couldn't get the connection to like just thinking about other media out of my head.
Well, I think the other media is like, I mean, fashion shows would evoke other media too. Like it's all interconnected. So so I think I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, Luxury Elite did some research and watched some fashion shows from the 80s. It drew inspiration from that, but those fashion shows from the 80s drew from contemporary movies. You know, it's all cycle, Burke. It's all
it's all big Ouroboros.
Yeah,
culture manufacturing. Yeah, it's true. That's fair.
Any other samples you want to play?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned, you know, how much I love all the different bass lines and bass sounds in this album. So here's a bit from track 8, Lifestyle Creep. I think this one just really stood out to me, especially that intro, just that boom, 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 like that just really deep muted bass. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't know, like very, very much.
It's very funky beat. I did like it. Yeah.
There's a lot of, there's so much like Design Office track 2. I know we're a little all over the place in terms of tracks. Like Design Office has like that Toe Jam and Earl Sega bass is what I think of it as.
Oh yeah.
Just killer little bits of instrumentation throughout the entire album. And going back to summer, like it's interesting, the summer aspect of it to me, because like it is just jams, just like feel good jams, like just kind of relaxing and enjoying yourself. But it's interesting. It's not as like thematically connected to summer for me, but it still feels like summer music.
Yeah.
To me. And I really dug into like why that's the case.
Well, I mean, all of this would be like party music too, right? Like yeah.
That's true.
And summer is the time of partying more than the other season. Like, it's a time for vacations. It's the time for not taking things as seriously as you would like in the winter or fall. You know, good times are here to stay. Good weather, good vibes. Yeah.
The 90s will never die.
The 90s will never die. End of history, baby. We won. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's true. That's a good point. I guess I was trying to like think too hard about it, but I think they're just great jams and everyone should check them out.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Our next episode, we are going to go back to a very special place for vaporwave fans, Kmart. A while ago, years ago, someone found a large number of tapes that would be played during Walmart or Kmart. I'm mixing up my marts, and they digitized these tapes and put them on archive.org. And since then, multiple artists have sampled these Kmart tapes to make their own albums. And there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So it'll be fun to dig into what has been done with this massive treasure trove of samples. And if you aren't already, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/nightclerkradio. We have some new rewards. We have mixes on our Discord for members. Obviously, our Discord is for members only, where we have a lot of cool discussions. And we're putting up some neat, unique rewards on there and working on essays. And of course, we have a good number of bonus episodes where we talk about a lot of interesting topics to fans of weird, haunted music. We are on Twitter at Nightclerk Radio. I am at Ross Payton. Burke is at Burke McBurkinson. We have a website, nightclerkradio.com, and a Facebook page. And don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you listen to. Give us all of them stars. We could use them. And tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell all your coworkers, and all the fashion models at the local JCPenney's fashion show. They would love to listen to this album in particular. And they've been working so hard on the catwalk. They could use a good, summer vacation, maybe a road trip too.
They deserve good music.
They deserve good music.
Everyone does.
Thank you, Bert. And thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time.